We begin the Gemara today, 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, where it says Omamar. The Gemara here quotes from what it brought for the Megillus Tainus, some of the things that it says there. So Omamar, the master had said, Mitmanye Bey, from the 8th day of Nisan, at Seif Mayede until the end of Pesach. Itaisiv Chage de Shvuaya. That was a time period where Chazal were successful in establishing the time of Shavuos. They were arguing with the Tzedaikim. They said that it has to be after on a Sunday, after Shabbos, and the Chachamim said no, it comes on the 2nd day of Pesach. So they were successful then at that time in establishing Pesach. So therefore, the Loila Mispat. They established this as a time where you can't fast and you can't give a eulogy. So the question on this is, Lamali at Seif Mayit. Why does it have to say that this is until the end of Pesach? Leime Adam Mayit. It should say until Pesach. Umayit Gufei Yomtufu. And the Yomtuf itself, Pesach, is a Yomtuf. So of course you're not allowed to fast. Vaser. Rav Papa says, similar to the answer that the Gemara said before. Kida'omar Rav. So before, Rav said, Leinitzrecha Elo Leser Yoim Shalafonov. That before, in this Megillus Tainus, when it mentioned regarding the Shchodesh Nisan, and the Gemara asked, why does it have to say that Shchodesh Nisan is a special day? It's anyways Rosh Chodesh. So Rav before answered that the point is to say that even the day before the Chodesh would also be asa to fast. So Hachanami, so here as well, what we could answer is, Leinitzrecha Elo Leser Yom Shala Achrov. It's coming to say that even the day after Pesach, it would not be allowed to fast, in order to, so that's why it says the Mayid. If it wouldn't say Mayid, so then I would know that the Yom Tov itself, you're not allowed to fast. But for the day after, I wouldn't know. As the Gemara said before, when it comes to the Chodesh, when it comes to a Yom Tov, so there's no Issa to fast the day before or after, and the reason is because Divrei Teira ein tzrichim chizuk. Something that's minat Teira doesn't need further encouragement, and therefore you could fast. So therefore we're saying over here, Mayid, that even the day after, you're also not allowed to fast. So the Gemara now says, so come on, according to whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yosi? Is this going according to Rabbi Yosi? Because if you remember in the Mishnah, we had a machlokes, whether the day after is also not allowed or not. The Tanna Kama in the Mishnah held that the Rabbanon, the Tanna Kama in the Mishnah held that only the day before you're not allowed to fast, but the day after you are allowed. It was Rabbi Yosi that said that you're not allowed not the day before and not the day after. So if this is Rabbi Yosi, the Amma, Bein Lefonov, Bein La'achrav Asa, that the day before and the day after are both Asa, so if it's going according to Rabbi Yosi, Be'esrim V'tisha, regarding the 29th day of Adar, which is the day before the Chodesh Nisan, because usually Adar is 29 days, and therefore it's the day before the Chodesh. So what did we say before regarding the first part of this Braisa? The only reason we mentioned that Chodesh Nisan is a special Yom Tov is in order to explain that you're not allowed to fast on the day before the Chodesh, which is the 29th of Adar. So now the Gemara asks regarding this day, the 29th of Adar, my area, why did you have to say before? The Havayayme, the Mekamayayme, the Mitaykim Tmide, that this is the day before the Chodesh Nisan, which is a Yom Tov, because that's when they established the halacha of the Korban Tamid, as it said in the first part of this Braisa. You don't need that. Typically, why don't you learn out from another thing? The Havale, Yaime, the Basa, Esrim, V'Tmanyebe, that Chavtes Adar is the day following Chav Ches Adar, and Chav Ches Adar is also a special day. It's a special Yom Tov. If you're going, like Rabbi Yosi's opinion, that says that the day after, you're also not allowed to fast, so you can say that the fact that it's after the day of Chav Ches Adar, that would be a reason why you can't fast on Chav Tes Adar. Now, what happened on Chav Ches Adar? So we had this once, we learned this in the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah. So the Tanya, it says there in the Braisa of Megillus Tainus as follows. Be'eser mitmanya bei, on the 28th day of Adar. Osas, besurte, toive, tavsel, yudoi. So the good news came to the Yidden, the lo yidun minoy raisa, that they do not have to go away from Teire. What happened? Shapa machas one time. Nigzara gzeir al Yisrael, there was a decree on the Yidden, shlo yaske beteire, that they're not allowed to learn Teire, v'shlo yamula as b'neim, and they shouldn't make a bris, v'shiyachalu shabboses, and they should desecrate Shabbos. Ma also Yehuda ben Shammua v'chaveirov. So what did Yehuda ben Shammua and his friends do to annul this decree? Holchu v'notlu eitze mimatrunisa achas. They went to seek advice from this prominent woman. Shekol gdolei Romi mitzuyin etzla. That the great people of Rome were always by her. So they wanted to hear what she thought, what would affect them, how could they get rid of this decree. Amr Lahem, so she said to the Chachamim, Imdu v'ifginu balayla. Go out at night and protest, and they'll be mevatel the gzeira. Halchu v'ifginu balayla. They went out at night and they protested. Omru, and they were protesting. They said as follows: Ei shamayim, woe to heaven. And then they turned to the Romans and said, Lo yachem anachnu. Aren't we your brothers? In other words, Yaakov and Esav were brothers, and the Romans come from Esav. Lo bnei av echad anachnu. Don't we have the same father, Yitzchak? Lo bnei em echas anachnu. Don't we have the same mother, which is Rivka? Manish taninu bekaluma v'loshen. Why are we different from all other nations? Shatem geizer maleinu gzeiris rois, that you decree upon us these terrible decrees. And so after this protest, ubatlum. And then the Romans came and they annulled the decree. On that day, Asu Yomtiv. They made it a Yomtiv. So this is the day of Chav Ches Adar. So if so, Chav Tes Adar is the day after this Yomtiv of Chav Ches Adar. So for following Rabbi Yossi's opinion, so Chav Tes Adar, you can't fast. There's no reason to say that you can't fast on Chav Tes because it's the day before the Chodesh. Amar Abaye explains, the reason why we're saying that Rosh Chodesh is a special Yom Tiv for the Karban Tamid is in the event that you have 30 days of Adar. So usually Adar is 29 days. But if there's an extra day, so it's 30 days, so then you're only not allowed to fast on the 30th day because it's the day before Rosh Chodesh. So Rashi says either it's B'chlal and Adar, if they made it a 30th day for whatever reason, or also in a Shana Mu'ber, it's like this year, so then one Adar is Chaser and one Adar is Mole. One Adar has 29 days and one Adar has 30 days. So the second Adar could have 30 days, and therefore, so the 30th day, you're only not allowed to fast because it's the day before the Chodesh. Ravashi gives a different answer. You could even say we're talking about a month of Adar that only has 29 days. Kol Shala Acharov, this that Rabbi Yossi says, that the day after a Yom Tov that was established in Megillas Tainus is not allowed also, is also Aser, but Tainus Aser. What he meant to say is that you're only not allowed to fast on the day after. If you remember when we were learning the Mishnah, I had a suffix about this. And here, Ravashi explains that only the day after, only with a fast you're not allowed. The Hesped mutter. But when it comes to a eulogy, the day after a Hesped is allowed. But v'zeh, over here, when it comes to this day, to Chav Tes Adar, Hoyul umutul bein shnei yomim tovim, because Chav Tes Adar is right in between two yomim tovim that it's established in Megillas Tainus. Chav Ches Adar is a Yom Tov, and Rosh Chodesh Nisan is a Yom Tov, so it's right in between. So Asu ki Yom Tov atzmai, they made this day like a Yom Tov itself, va'afilu behesped nama yasser, and therefore you're not allowed to fast, and also not allowed to give a eulogy. So that's the chiddush of this day, and therefore it has to say both the Chav Ches Adar being a Yom Tov, and also that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is a Yom Tov. So going back again to this thing, and here the Gemara is going to discuss a different aspect. So we said that Mitmanya Bey, from the 8th day of Nisan, Vatseif Mayeda, until the end of Pesach, Itosav Chagad the Shvuaya, they established the right time for Shavuos. The Leila Mispad, and therefore there's no eulogy in this time. So the question now is, Lomali Lemeima Mitmanya Bey. Why does it have to say that this begins on the 8th day of Nisan? Leime Mitisha Bey. It should say from the 9th day of Nisan. Utmanya Gufe Aser, the 8th day would be forbidden to fast or to give a eulogy. The Havela Yaime de Toikim Beit Tmida, because the 8th day is the last day of the previous Yom Tov. It said before this in Megillas Tainus that from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the 8th day is the time period when they established the Talmud, and therefore all those 8 days are also to fast or give a eulogy. So then why does it have to say regarding Shavuos that starts from the 8th day? It should start from the 9th day. Answers the Gemara, Kivin the ilu mikla milsa. Because if something happens, ubatline le shiva, and they were the 7 days of fasting, of the 7 days of Nisan, that is, and they are going to make everyone fast on that day. Let's say some kind of a terrible tzara happens to Klal Yisrael, and the Chachamim have no choice, and they're geyser gzeira on the beginning of Nisan, on the first 7 days of Nisan. Tmanya Gufei Aser. So then, the first 7 days, they're going to be mevatel that Yom Tov that there is in the beginning of Nisan. But the 8th day is going to still remain a Yom Tov. So Rashi explains what the Gemara is saying here. The first 8 days are one big Yom Tov. What's the Yom Tov of the first 8 days? The time when Chachamim established the Karban Tamid. If for whatever reason there's a tzara and they have to require Yidden to fast on one of those days, so not only that one day is going to be batal, but these 8 days are considered to be one time of a Yom Tif. Once you've been mevatel one of the days of those Yom Tif, so then the whole Yom Tif is batal. So then all 7 days you're allowed to fast. But now what happens with the 8th day? The 8th day is a Yom Tif for 2 reasons. It's the last day of the Yom Tif of the time when they established the Tamid, and it's the first day of the Yom Tif when the time they established Shavuos. So even if you mevatel the whole Yom Tif of the Karban Tamid, but the 8th day is still going to stay a Yom Tif because there's a second reason why it's a Yom Tif. It's also a Yom Tif for the fact that they established Shavuos on that day. So therefore the Havalei, this is also the first day that they established the Yom Tov of Shavuos. So therefore, you're still going to have to fast on the 8th day. So that's why the Braisa is saying that they began establishing the Yom Tov of Shavuos on the 8th day, in the event that they were mevatel the Yom Tov of the Karban Tamid. Sagt the Gemara, so now that you're giving such an answer, that has to give you the date in the event that they will mevatel this Yom Tov of the Karban Tamid. So you could say the same thing, Esrim V'Tisha Nami, the 29th day of Adar, which is the day before the Chodesh Nisan. So you can say that Kivin the Ilu Mikla Milsa, if something would happen, Ubatline LeEsrim V'Tmanya, and the Yom Tov of the 28th day of Nisan, of Adar that is, and the Yom Tov of the 28th day of Adar would be batal, so Esrin V'Tisha Gufe Aser, but still the 29th day would be Aser to fast. The Havela Yomed, the Mekame Yomed, they take him to Midah. It still is the day that comes before the Chodesh Nisan, which is the day that they established the Karban Tamid. So that was one of our questions before, that the 29th day of Adar should be Aser because it's the day after the 28th of Adar. So why do we have to say that it's the day before the Chodesh Nisan? The answer is, in the event that the Yom Tov of Chav Ches Adar is batal, it's still going to be the day before the Chodesh Nisan. Itmer, now we learned Rab Chiya bar Asi Amar Rav. Going back now to this machlokes here between Rab Yosi and the Tanakama in our Mishnah, whether a day that you're not allowed to fast and a day that you're not allowed to give a eulogy, does that mean that it's Asr before and after as well? Or is it only Asr before, the day before, and not Asr the day after? So Rav said the halacha is Rab Yosi. Shmuel Ama halacha Rab Meir. Shmuel says the halacha is like Rab Meir, which is the Stam Mishnah, the first opinion of the Mishnah that says that it's only Asr the day before, but it's not Asr the day after. Frag the Gemara, mi am Shmuel achi. Did Shmuel say that the halacha is like Rab Meir? But we learned in the Braisa that he actually passed like a third opinion, which was even more makel. Rab Shimon Gamliel says, in the Braisa we quoted before from Megillas Tainis, it says there that there are days in the Megillah there that loylis anah b'hoin, you're not allowed to fast in them, and then it said the loyla mismad b'hoin, and some of those days you're not allowed to give a hesped. So it says twice the word b'hoin in these days. So Shimon Gamliel says this is to tell you shehein asurin. These days are asr to fast or to give a hesped, but lifneim v'lachreim mutar. The day before and the day after are both mutar. So Rab Shimon Gamliel is actually more makel, even more than Rab Meir. He says the day before and after are mutar. V'ama Shmuel halacha Rab Shimon Gamliel, and Shmuel paskins like Rab Shimon Gamliel. So how can we say that Shmuel paskins like Rab Meir, that the day before is asr and the day after is mutar? And says the Gemara, Mei Kara Savar. In the beginning, Shmuel thought that given the Leka Tana de Mekel Rab Meir, since there is no Tana that's more Mekel than Rab Meir, some Agoris in the Gemara here, instead of Kirab Meir, Meirab Meir. Because the point the Gemara is saying is that in the beginning, Shmuel thought that there's nobody that's more Mekel than Rab Meir. So therefore, Amar halacha Rab Meir. So he said that the halacha is like Rab Meir, which is the most lenient opinion. But Kiva the Shamei, Rab Shimon Gamliel, but then when he heard that there's the opinion of Rab Shimon Gamliel, the Mekel Tfei, that's Mekel even more than Rab Meir, so Amar halacha Rab Shimon Gamliel. So then he went and paskin like Rab Shimon Gamliel, which is even more lenient. Okay, so this is so we have over here a few opinions. We have the opinion of Rav, now the opinion of Shmuel. Then over here now the Gemara is saying that Shmuel paskins like the most lenient opinion that before and after you're allowed to fast. Now there's an V'chein Bali. Regarding this, Bali said, Rashi says Bali is the name of a Chacham. Amar Rab Chiya bar Abba Amar Rab Yochanan, that halacha Rab Yosi. He paskins similar to Rav that halacha is like Rab Yosi. Amar Rab Chiya le Bali. Rab Chiya says to Bali, Asber Eloch. Let me explain this to you. There's actually two different cases that Rab Meir and Rab Yosi argued in our Mishnah. Kiyam Rabbi Yechanan, halachic Rabbi Yosi, regarding what did Rabbi Yechanan say that we paskin like Rabbi Yosi? Adoloi lehisano, regarding the days that it says in Megillah's Tainis that you're not allowed to fast. If you remember in the Mishnah, so it said that there are two kinds of days. There's the days that you don't fast, and then there's the days that you don't fast, and you don't give a hesped either. Now, regarding the days that you don't fast, Rab Meir holds that you could fast before and after. And Rabbi Yosi says that on such a day, you're not allowed to fast before. Then there's the days that you're not allowed to fast, and you're not allowed to give a hesped either. On those days, the machlokes is, Rab Meir holds that you can't fast before, but you could fast after. And Rabbi Yosi says not before and not after. So he's telling him that when Rabbi Yechanan said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yosi, he was talking about this that Rabbi Yosi said regarding those days that you're not allowed to fast, the day before. Fragt the Gemara, mi am Rabbi Yechanan hachi, did Rabbi Yechanan say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yosi, that you're not allowed to fast the day before those Yomim Tovim that are established in Megillah's Tainis? But for Rabbi Yechanan said, halacha kestam Mishnah. This is a rule Rabbi Yechanan says throughout Shas, we always paskin like a stam Mishnah. Utnan, and there's a stam Mishnah towards the beginning of Masechta Megillah. Afal pi sha'amru magdimin. Even though it was said regarding reading the Megillah that you can read the Megillah before the time of Yud Daled Adar, right? That's the first Mishnah in Masechta Megillah where it speaks about that sometimes you read the Megillah on Yud Aleph, sometimes on Yud Beis, sometimes on Yud Gimel, and so on. So you can read it on days before, but v'loy ma'achrin, you can't read it after Tezvav Adar. You can't read later. But the Mishnah there says, mutarin behesped v'tainis. On the days before, even though you're reading, you could read the Megillah on days before, but nevertheless, those days are allowed for a hesped and are allowed to fast. That's what it says there in the Mishnah. So now before the Gemara explains what's the question of here and what Rabbi Yechanan said, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yosi, first the Gemara is going to explain to us what exactly is that Mishnah in Megillah speaking about. Now Amos, what are we talking about that you're reading the Megillah a day before its time, and it's going to be mutter behesped v'tainis? If you're going to say the pshat here is B'nei Chameser, the people of walled cities like Yerushalayim, that they usually read the Megillah on Tezvav Adar, the Kakarele Bar Beiser, and one of the people of Yerushalayim was in a city which is outside Yerushalayim, and he read the Megillah on Yud Daled Adar, so he read it a day before the day that the city that he lives in. So on that day, you're going to say that the Mishnah is saying that he's allowed to give a tainus and he's allowed to give a hesped on that, or he's allowed to fast to give a hesped on that day. But umishari, is that allowed on Yudal Adar? V'haksiv b'Megillas Tainus. In Megillas Tainus it says Yom Arba Asabay, Yom Chamish Asabay, the 14th and the 15th day of Adar, Yom Puraya Inon. These days are purim. The Leila Mispad Bay, you're not allowed to fast, and you're also not allowed to give a hesped on this day. And what's the pshat here in this Megillah's Tainis? V'omar Rave explained that lo nitzrecha le'ela leser es shalzeh bezeh ve'shalzeh bezeh. In Megillah's Tainis, he doesn't have to come and tell you for a person that is actually from a place where purim there is on Yudalid, that he's not allowed to fast on that day. That's obvious. It's written in the Megillah itself, that it's a day which is a Mishnah v'simcha. Or a person that comes from Yerushalayim, that he's not allowed to fast on Tezvav Adar, that's also obvious. That's his purim. What was the chiddush of Megillah's Tainis? Even a person from Yerushalayim, on Yudal Adar, he's not allowed to fast. And even a person that's from a regular place, a regular city, is also not allowed to fast on Tezvav Adar, which is the purim of the people in Yerushalayim. That's what Zeh B'Zeh means, V'Zeh B'Zeh. So therefore, you can't say that in the Mishnah, when it says that you're allowed to fast, it refers to Yudal Adar for a person from Yerushalayim. So that's not the pshat. So Ve'ela, what would be the pshat? B'nei Arbeisa, people from regular cities, from open cities that usually read the Megillah on Yudal Adar, v'kakarele b'tleiser, and they're reading the Megillah on the 13th day, like it says in the beginning of Masechta Megillah, that sometimes they read the Megillah a day before on the 13th day of Adar. And on that day, the Mishnah is saying in Masechta Tainis, or Masechta Megillah that is, that you're allowed to fast on that day. But the question is, that can't be pshat either. Because Yom Nikner Hu, the 13th day of Adar, is also a special day which is mentioned in Megillah's Tainis. And what is it called? Yom Nikner, the day of Nikner, which the Gemara is soon going to spell out what this Yom Nikner is. So that can't be the day that the Mishnah in Megillah is saying that you can fast. Ve'elo, so then let's try another pshat. B'nei Arbeiser, we're talking about people that keep purim on Yudal Adar. v'kakarile b'treiser. And they're reading the Megillah not on the 13th day, but they will mock them to read the Megillah 2 days before, and they're reading it on Yud Beis Adar. And on that day, the Mishnah in Megillah is saying that you're allowed to fast. Fragt the Gemara, that can't be true either. Yom Turyainisu. In Megillah's Tainus, it says that that's also a special day. This is a day called Yom Turyainis. Now, what exactly happened on Yom Turyainis? The Gemara will soon explain as well. Elo, so the Gemara says, Lav, don't you think? What's the pshat here? The kakarele bechatzer, like bechadeser, like it says in the beginning of Masechta Megillah. You can read the Megillah as early as Yud Aleph Adar. So they're reading the Megillah on Yud Aleph Adar, and on that it says v'katoni mutter behesped v'tainis, that you're allowed to make a hesped and a tainus on this day. So what do you see from this? So this is the conclusion of the Gemara's question on Rabbi Yochanan. Yud Beis Adar is a special day in Megillah's Tainus. What's that day called? Yom Turyainis. And the day before, which is Yud Aleph, it's saying here in the Mishnah that you're allowed to fast, even though it's a day before a special day. But Rabbi Yochanan said that you're passing like Rabbi Yosi. And Rabbi Yosi said that a day before a special day, you're not allowed to fast. So how could you fast on Yud Aleph Adar, which is the day before Yud Beis, that's called Yom Turyainis, and it's a special day? So the Gemara says, Loi, that's not the pshat on that Mishnah Megillah there. B'nei Arba, it is talking about the people that usually read the Megillah on Yud Daled Adar, v'kakarele betreiser, and they read the Megillah on Yud Beis Adar. So before we rejected this pshat, v'dika amred, what did you say before? Yom Turyainis, that this is a special Yom Tov in Megillah's Tainus because it's called Yom Turyainis. So how could you say that you fast on that day? Yom Turyainis gufei batuli batlu. This day of Yom Turyainis was annulled. Why was it annulled? Hoyel v'nergu by Shmaya v'achia. Because there were 2 holy tzaddikim that were killed on this day, so therefore they were mevatel the Yom Tov of this day. Rashi here actually says that these were 2 great chassidim, and he doesn't know who they were. And the other Rishonim, the Aruch, says that this was 2 chassidim. There was a time when there was a princess that was killed from the Romans, and they accused the Yidden. They were going to kill all the Yidden. So these 2 brothers came along and said, we were the ones that did it, even though they didn't, and they got killed in the place of everyone else. So because of this terrible tragedy, they were mevatel the Yom Tov of this day. Kihad, Rav Nachman, like what happened once with Rav Nachman. Gaza Tanisa Betreisa. He decreed to fast on the 12th day of Adar. Amrulei Rabbanon. The Rabbanon said to him, Yom Turyainisu. This is a Yom Tov. This is called Yom Turyainis. Amalahu. So he responded to the Chachamim, Yom Turyainis Gufe Batuli Batluhu. This day, this Yom Tov of Yom Turyainis was annulled already. Hoyel v'nerga by Shmaya v'achia achiv. Because Shmaya and his brother were killed on this day. Fragt the Gemara, v'teipik lei, but havele yom sheliftnei nikner. Even if they were mevatel the Yom Tov of Yom Turyainis, but if we're following Rabbi Yosi's opinion that even the day before a Yom Tov you're not allowed to fast, it's the day before the 13th, which is also a Yom Tov. It's called the day of Nikner, so you shouldn't be allowed to fast for that. Ravashi, so Ravashi says, no, of course not. Hashta iyu gufei batluhu. This day itself, Yud Beis, is not considered to be a Yom Tov because of the tragedy of that day. So mishum yom nikner neikim v'nigzer. So you're going to tell me that you can't fast on this day because it's the day before Yom Nikner? If it's a day of a tragedy, so you're allowed to fast on this day. So therefore, the day Yud Beis, the Yom Tov of Yom Turyainis, was batel. Okay, but now the Gemara explains, what are these 2 Yom Tovim here? There's a Yom Tov called Yom Nikner, and there's a Yom Tov called Yom Turyainis. What are these 2 Yom Tovim? My Nikner or my Turyainis? The Tanya, so we learned in the Braise, Nikner, who was Nikner? Echad me'afrache Yevonim hoya. He was one of the ministers of the Yevonim. It's a tremendous Ashkacha Pratis. We're learning this today, the first day of Chanukah, because this is mamish part of the story of Chanukah. B'chol Yom v'Yom, every single day. Hayemenif Yadai al Yehuda of Yerushalayim. He would raise up his hands on the Yidden, on Yehuda, on Eretz Yisrael, on Yerushalayim, and v'aymen he would say, Eimesai tipul biyadi, when is this going to fall into my hands? V'armesena, and I will trample upon them. And when the Chashmonaim was stronger, and they defeated all of the Yevonim, so they captured this Nikner, and katetzu b'hainis yadav v'raglov, they cut off the tips of his hands and his feet, and v'talum b'shara Yerushalayim, and they hung it by the gate of Yerushalayim. And v'amru, and they said, Peh shahayim medaber begaiva, this mouth that was speaking with such haughtiness, and v'yadayim shahayim menifis Yerushalayim, and he lifted his hands over Yerushalayim. Tasa behem nekama. Here we have our revenge in him. The Marsha, I believe, actually adds to this Gemara that because he also spoke in such a way against the Yidden, they also cut off his head and hung it up in the entrance of Yerushalayim. The Gemara doesn't say it beferish, but that's what the Marsha says. So this is the Yom Tov of Nikner. My Turyainus, what was the Yom Tov of Turyainus? So Amru, they said as follows: Geshebikish, Turyainus, Lareg, Es Lulinus, Upapus, Achiv. There were two holy tzaddikim, Lulinus and Papus, that he wanted to kill them, Belutkia, and this was in Lutkia. And Rashi says Lutkia is Lud in Eretz Yisrael, and this is what the Gemara says in Baba Basra regarding the Halruge Lud. These individuals that were killed from the city of Lud that are tremendous holy tzaddikim, and they go on to Gan Eden and so on. And Rashi actually, the story that I mentioned before regarding Shmaya and Achia, Rashi brings that same story regarding these two individuals, Lulinus and Papus. Rashi says that it happened with these two individuals, that they allowed themselves to be killed. So what happened? So Amar Lehem, so Turyainus said to them, if you are from the nation of the same holy tzaddikim, Chananya, Mishael, and Azariah, so even if I'm going to try to kill you, your God should come and save you from my hands, just like Chananya, Mishael, and Azariah was saved from the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. Amrullah, so Lulinus and Papus responded to him, they were total tzaddikim. And they were worthy that a nes should happen to them. And also Nebuchadnezzar melech haganhoya. Nebuchadnezzar was a king which was on a higher level, and therefore he was worthy that a miracle should happen, it should be coming through him. But that Rasha, referring to this Rasha here, Turyainus, he's a simple person, and he's not worthy that a nes should happen through him. And also they said, and we are worthy, we are fitting to die for the Eibishter. So if you're not going to be the one that's going to kill us, the Eibishter has many different messengers that he could use to kill us. So don't think that we're in your hands and you're in control of us. The Eibishter, we're chayiv, whatever we're chayiv, it's to the Eibishter. The Eibishter has a lot of bears or lions in the world. The they can come and attack us and kill us. The only reason why the Eibishter gives us over into your hands, because the Eibishter is going to come and punish us and take revenge for our blood from your hands. Which means even though he is a shliach to fulfill what the Eibishter wants, that we're chayiv misa, but nevertheless he has his own bechira, and therefore he's going to be chayiv misa for what he's doing to us. And this is what they said to Turyainus. Now what happened? Afal Pikain, after all of this that they said to him, Hargan, he did go ahead and kill them. Miyad, right away he killed them. Amru, they said, Loizazu misham, they were not moved from there. In other words, their bodies was not moved from there. Until the Yulfi, which are two ministers of Rome, came, and they opened up his head, they smashed his head with the blocks of wood. So this Turyainus, which was a tremendous Rasha, was immediately killed on that day. So that was the Yom Tov of this Yom Turyainus. Okay, going back to what it said in the Mishnah, Ein Geizrin Tainus al Tzibur B'tchila B'chamishi. You don't decree a Tainus on the Tzibur that should begin on a Thursday. Ein Geizrin Tainus B'Rosh Chodoshim, and there's also no Tainus on a Rosh Chodesh. And then it said in the Mishnah, once you began fasting earlier, and then it continues into Rosh Chodesh or even into Chanukah or Purim, you could continue fasting. V'kama havi aschala. What does it mean that you already began fasting from before? Ravacha Omar Sholish. Ravacha says if they already fasted 3 Tanesim, a Monday, Thursday, and a Monday. Ravasi Omar Ravasi says Achas, even if they only fasted once before, they could continue fasting. Omar Rav Yudah Marav Zu Divrei Rav Meir She'Omar Mishum Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. This that it says in our Mishnah is in the name of Rabbi Gamliel. And it said in our Mishnah that even if you continue fasting, you don't fast a full day. You can't complete the fast at the end of the day. The Chachamim said if you began fasting from before, Mis'ane Umashlim, you could continue fasting even on a Rosh Chodesh, even on a Yontif, or even on Purim, that is, you can fast until the end of the day. Darish Marzutre, Mishmei de Rav Hone, Marzutre Darshans in the name of Rav Hone, that halacha, we paskin, the halacha is Mis'ane Umashlim, that you could fast, that you could continue fasting until the end of the day, like the opinion of the Chachamim. Hadran Allah say the tiniest Ketzad. Let me just mention one thing that there was before in Taisus, an interesting thing regarding Tainus Esther, because the question was brought up when we were learning before. How could you fast in Tainus Esther if it's a day before Purim? If we paskin like Rabbi Yosi, that a day before Purim, you're not allowed to fast. So how do you fast on Tainus Esther? So there's a few opinions about this. Taisus discusses this, and Taisus gives answers, but one of the answers is what I mentioned already before, and you get to Tainus Esther, that it's not a fast like every other fast. It's a fast that's like a yontif. It's to commemorate the miracle that happened. And it's not a fast which is a sad day. The Rebbe spoke about this and mentioned that when Mashiach comes, it says that all the fasts are going to be bottled. But Tainus Esther, lav dafka, it's going to be bottled, because it's not a fast which is a sad day, it's a happy day. It's commemorating the simcha they had when they had to fast, and then when they were fighting, and then it brought to the yontif of Purim.